there, my beautiful, gorgeous beings of light, with Nick and Bean unscripted. Yeah, baby.
I'm Beanie.
I'm Nick.
We're going to take you on a journey of conversations that include things like purple unicorns, aliens, real life stuff, and everything in between.
We can't wait to see where these conversations take us, because I can guarantee you they're going to get pretty cray-cray.
Well, with you in the room, Nicola, anything can happen.
That is true. Thank you for joining us on our journey. If you have any input that you want to add to this channel, we would love to hear from you. In the meantime, let's get the show on the road. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to our episode this week. We are talking all things psilocybin, so mushrooms and psychedelics, and the impact that it does have, potential impact it does have on our mental well-being, and just transforming our lives. We have the beautiful Antanika on with us. She is how I found Antanika was, well, obviously I was doing a lot of searching, going, okay, who the fuck am I going to get on my show? Because it's obviously we're very passionate about it, because we've had our own experiences with mushroom, and we, microdosing is something that we fucking fly the flag on. And then I found you, and you're the president of Psychedelic Association Australia, and you've actually done a lot of other things in the way of mental health sciences and overarching mental health esteem in this area. So it's fucking very serendipitous that we've got you on the show, so we can really get down to the nits and crannies of it, because you seemed there's a lot of wealth of knowledge that we are looking forward to sharing with our audiences, because they, most like-minded people, are like us and wanting to better themselves in totality and just be fucking whole, really, as much as possible.
I think too, just to interject there, like the difficulty in finding someone to talk about it is the fear around it as well, and what it might mean for societies and people. So it'd be good to just have that conversation. For me, I'm so passionate about it being a thing, and you're going to explain to us why it's so good in a more technical manner, other than just we can see that different mind states and altered states to be able to bring into our lives, in a sense, which is something that I read on your bio, which I've really liked in that. So would you like to have a little bit of a...
Yeah, well, my first question I really want to know, how we normally start off, is how the fuck did you get into psychedelics? And how what has been your life, obviously, in that's transformative, universe is guiding you, okay, now I'm doing this kind of theory.
It's such a long story, but I'll give you the short version. How long does this podcast go for?
It's endless. It's endless.
It's life.
We might need to break it, but other than that,
toilet breaks and dinners and a nap in between. I found psychedelics in 2000, and I want to say 16, 17-ish. And the reason that I had stumbled upon them was simply because I had treatment-resistant depression. I'd been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, the anxiety disorders, I had the whole package, that us women get handed when we have childhood trauma and difficult childhoods. Essentially I had a really difficult upbringing with my mum, who had a lot of issues with substance use and that sort of thing, and my whole family, which, resulted in, trigger warning, childhood sexual abuse, and then, the flow and effect that has on sort of someone's life. And when I was about 24, I met my current husband, who became this sort of safe place for me to fall apart. I was a single mum from 20 to 24 when I met my husband. So, I had started to realize that I wasn't okay, that the substance use disorders that I had weren't very helpful for myself, my health, and my family. And then, that was, I'm trying to think of dates, but it doesn't really matter, does it? So eventually what happened was I'd gone through a lot of the treatments with antidepressants, I'd been put on antipsychotics, all of like the
Wow.
Valiums, and nothing worked.
Mm.
So your the anxiety and all that kind of stuff just was still there, and yeah.
Yeah, and that led to even more substance use, and then I started using painkillers of like over-the-counter painkillers, or my Omar's painkillers, and it had become quite a problem. And my drinking got quite out of hand because these medications that they'd put me on were only making me worse. They weren't helping me see the bigger picture. They weren't helping me see myself for who I really was or what I could be, sort of thing. And so then one day my husband was on his way. I'd had a few difficult times with my substance use. I had almost passed out in a shopping center from some of the pain meds I was on. I was drinking in secret, that sort of thing. And one day I'd knocked myself out, and my husband thought I'd died and found me on the floor. And he was like, "This is just getting too much. Like, the psychology appointments aren't helping. Nothing's working." So he had been coming home from work one night, and he heard on a podcast, a Duncan Trussell podcast, about psychedelics and how people were using psilocybin and MDMA to treat their complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And so I went and absorbed as much information as I could. I was on just reading Reddit post after Reddit post. I was on the Third Wave podcast, listening to Third Wave, content, reading everything I could, until I felt like I was in a space to actually, partake in that experience, because I'd gotten so bad that I just was like, if this kills me, I didn't know anything about these substances. Everyone said they were safe, but that ingrained psychedelics will kill you and make you be a blue elephant and jump off of a roof was something that I thought was potentially going to happen. And so I had all this fear, like maybe it'll kill me, maybe my heart will give out, maybe this will happen. And so I had all these fears, but at that point in my life, I was at such a distressed state that I didn't care. I was like, if I don't do this, I'm going to die anyway. I had a lot of suicidal thoughts and ideations around that time too. So it was a really heavy time, and really I was just heavy. Which isn't ideal, it's not the ideal setting to jump into such a big experience when you're in such a low part of your life, and that's not something I really necessarily recommend. But my husband was a trained psychotherapist in altered states. Conveniently, he just finished his training, so we sought out LSD, and we sat together one evening after, all these months of research, and it completely changed my perspective of who I was within 12 hours. And the next day, I gave up drinking, I gave up the pain meds, I gave up everything within that week.
Wow, just like that.
And so can I ask about the LSD? So was it because I've never done LSD. Was it a micro?
Yes, you
have. Is acid? No, I've never done acid. No. Wow, that stuff scares me.
18 years, who would have thought?
So was it a micro dose, or how did you get it?
Full session.
Was it a full session?
She can't give away her sources.
Yeah.
It's always from somebody I always say, the thing about sourcing substances is that, I always tell people to do that, I can't help you find them. Other people probably don't want to help you find them. But at the end of the day, if you're, doing the research, you'll just find yourself one day with these substances in your lap, and you just are like, this is divine intervention.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how it does. It sort of does happen that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, what was your question?
Was it a full dose, or was it
yes,
full dose?
Yeah, it was a full dose.
And did you know what? Because it's a little bit hit and miss as to how much is a full dose, right? So how did you know?
Well, I just had to trust the person who gave it to me. One tab equals one dose, and in anywhere in that dose, it could be from 90 micrograms to 120 to 130 micrograms. And so I knew that there was this particular dose, and there was a lot of research back in, I think, the 1960s and 70s around LSD and alcohol use disorder. And they had found that it had a really good, successful, like, sobriety, like enabled people to come off of these substances with just a few doses or a dose. And so I knew that going in. And so I haven't really drank since then. Like, I've had one time where I had one day where I drank and I got very drunk and it was not a good time, but that's it. I haven't touched it since.
What was there anything specific that you saw, like when you were in that space, like let's say under the influence of or whatever? Because for me, my idea is like whether it's like medicine ceremonies or mushrooms or anything like that, it's kind of like, because the mind is so malleable and it doesn't know the difference between fiction and reality, etc., that once we get an idea of something, then we kind of can't go back. And not in a bad way. I don't mean like in the sense of too much, so you're going to stand there switching a light off and on for the rest of your life and you can't focus, but like to the point where it opens up a level of consciousness that you just, it is all encompassing. It's like, it's such a holistic thing that you can't really explain other than you've seen it now or experienced now or felt it now or energetically been in that space now. So that knowingness, it's more of like a knowingness that...
Yeah, so in that particular experience for me, so each of my experiences sort of had this main theme along, sort of a time period. And I see it as like, my psychedelic use has been like peeling an onion. You're peeling back layer after layer and layer. And I sort of feel like I'm at a point now where I don't really need to peel back the layers. I need to rebuild now. And I don't really use psychedelics anymore because I feel like I've peeled those layers, and over time you sort of fades out and you no longer need to use the substances in the way you once did. But for me, in that first session, I sat with my husband and we laughed and we cried about some of the just most tragic things. And the thing that I took away from that was actually a lot around forgiveness for myself, the abuser that was in, like, that had caused a lot of the distress and trauma, my family. I had reduced, I went through this process of reducing the man who had hurt me as a kid down to a child and made him this innocent being so that I could see him as this other creature in the world rather than somebody who hurt me. And so that's a really hard thing for a lot of people to understand, especially when you're in the thick of the trauma, and like being in that victim mentality space is a necessarily part of healing sort of thing. And that's where I was for a long time. And so I was able to access forgiveness and able to see the picture from a broader perspective, I think. Obviously there's so many other things that happened, like that within the next few months, my warts on my hands disappeared after the LSD experience. Like there was a full body response that had happened after. Yeah, so there's like all these weird little bits and pieces. I became more aware of my hormonal cycles. I realized like I had PMDD, which was combining with the PTSD, which, and so the week after I had that first session, I was actually also participating like in the first week of a 16-week what they call cognitive processing therapy trial at the Flinders University. And I didn't really realize then at that point that psychedelic therapy paired with any kind of therapy or psychotherapy was actually a really great way to help somebody heal from trauma. And so I had inadvertently sort of gone and had this psychedelic experience, gone into 16 weeks of weekly cognitively processing therapy to change the way I felt about my core beliefs. And so I went into my first session I think it was like on the Tuesday or the Wednesday, and I said to the psychologist, like, I don't feel like I should be here. And she was like, well, you do. And then I told her why. And she's like, well, I think you should just keep at it, sort of thing. And so we did. And by the end, I was signed off as being in remission of my PTSD. So, and that was in 16 weeks. And there was like we did a victim impact statement before, and we did one after. And the contrast of those two statements between that amount of time was completely different. I'd gone from feeling like that everything that had happened to me over my childhood and my life was my fault and I was a victim, to me being like, okay, so how am I going to use this to empower myself, get better, and, become a better version of who I am. It was pretty profound. So
that's amazing. 16 weeks is phenomenal.
And so I also lost 20 kilos because I gave up alcohol. So, I had, it was
body was just like shredding all the stuff. It was incredible. Yeah. And so what happened after your first LSD experience? Did you then go, wow, this has really opened me up. I want more. Is that what happened, or?
It did. It took me about 6 months. After an LSD experience, you're like, I don't want to do that again. It was 12 hours is a long time.
A long time.
I don't enjoy LSD even still. Like, it's a very powerful substance and it's very external. I have a bit of theory around the ways in which we can use different medicines. And for me, LSD enables me to see the world in a different way, whereas psilocybin allows me to see my inner working in a different way. And so I didn't use LSD again until about 6 months later, where I was sort of struggling with all these newfound boundaries and new ideas and who I'd peeled off one layer and I was ready to sort of peel off the next layer. But in between that, one of the things I will touch on is what you guys sort of mentioned when we first jumped on the call, is like, so how do you talk about it though? Like, how do you talk to people about this? Because they have, talking about using psychedelics, you don't just go to school to pick up your kids and talk about it like I did. So, I did it in the holidays of school, and I went back to school one day, and one of my friends was like, the school mums was like, so you look completely different. What's going on, sort of thing. And I was like, I did LSD with my husband. And she was like, is that like meth? And I was like, oh, shit. No. And then I sort of decided from that point that I wouldn't talk to anyone about it until I had a more depth of understanding about what they do and how they do it, which is how I found the Australian Psychedelic Society. So, there's actually a full article I wrote about that particular thing, and I'll share it with you guys. But so then I was feeling a little stuck. I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself after that experience. I was like, who am I without my trauma? That was the next stage. Like, who am I without constantly crying? Who am I without the alcohol? Who am I without all of the substance abuse? Who am I without the flashbacks? I just never thought. And so I had another experience which completely changed the next direction of my life, sort of thing. I had after that experience, I decided I wanted to go to university, and turns out I was a really great student.
Wow.
I saw in my mind, literally, like, have you guys seen the Inside Out film?
No.
Oh gosh, you guys watched both of them. Best film. In the Inside Out film, some of your listeners will probably know and be like, I have. There's these within the mind of this girl, there's all these like things that hold all of our memories, and they look like the grooves of your brain, almost, sort of thing. And in this experience, all of the walls in my mind fell into gaps in the floor that allowed all of my networks in my brain. This is what it felt like. I was sitting out under a tree, and it allowed all these networks in my brain to reconnect. And I realized, like, I'm not stupid. Because I grew up thinking I was stupid. I was terrible in school. I was always inattentive. I couldn't finish my projects, blah, 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 so on and so on. And after that, I was like, I want to work in psychedelics. And so around that time, I was also volunteering as the social media person and writing newsletters for the Australian Psychedelic Society. And I said to my husband, I want to run that thing one day. I want to be the president of the Australian Psychedelic Society. And that was in 2018.
Wow.
And so I've been the president now for a year.
That's awesome. So good. Manifested the shit out of that one. Good, well done.
I sure did. And I've been on the university journey ever since, sort of thing. But yeah, that sort of was the start of my psychedelic experience journey. And from there, I experimented with other psychedelics as well, which had incredibly profound, results. And I realized like I'm a bit of a poster child for psychedelics in many ways, but I think I had enough context. I wanted to get better so badly. And I think that that's when they work the best, is when somebody, that's why the treatment resistance, depression people have such a good result, I think, is because they so badly want to get better.
Yeah. They're at that point, aren't they?
Yeah. And so I think that healthy people can have a really great experiences to explore themselves and their consciousness and, all of those things. But I think ultimately a lot of us who have complex traumas really get to experience the most benefits. But that's not everyone.
But maybe that's more obvious as well, like I think about everyone that goes through, like if you call them the everyday civilian versus the person with deep trauma, like I feel like everyone is in trauma in some way, shape, or form, so everyone in any circle that I've been in, and I do kinesiology as a trade as well. So there's a lot of like age retrieval and all of that sort of stuff and reconnecting. But everyone you see in any of those spaces, like everyone's searching for something, everyone's searching for that. That answer, like, and a lot of the time their answer is like, what's wrong with me, in a space. And so that's searching. You said something earlier about when you had your first experience and how even your warts went from your hands, like everything was so profound. And to me, it was like perfectly explaining how when the body is under so much stress and survival, we don't realize all of the other physiological things that are happening with it, right? And then I was even writing a letter to someone today and explaining certain things like that, but I was also thinking about the different ways that trauma had affected me in life and the subset of that of the drugs and the alcohol and everything else to do those things, but also the physiological effects that stress had and has on people's bodies, right? And you said it's like when you were talking, I'm going, well, this like chick has either been sitting on the windowsill of my life and your life, a bit different, but like there's definitely like similar stories for a lot of people when they go through that, because learning is not a thing, right? Like when you're in stress, and I used to say to people, I didn't do well at school because I was outside of myself. Like I was standing here and this person was here, but I was really, my main aim was to not let people know how crumbling how much crumbling was happening inside. So whatever I had to do to perceive to be normal, that took up so much energy, like so much energy. Like I'm not going to learn anything in that space. I'm better off being the joker at the back and doing whatever I can to maintain that space than actually learn something. Because if I learn and I'm not good at it, that's going to be even worse for me and send me even more into the belief system of that person. So it's just interesting for you to say all of that, but for other people to understand in those circumstances, and especially when it comes to that desperate point as well, and you're adding things onto things as to why you're not a great person or why you feel like you're, like you said before, like generally people believe that they're not a great person because not great things happened to them, right? And therefore that must be something wrong with you or them or me or whatever it is. And we're taught in, I'm going to say every day, like the psychology, and I know you've gone down that path now, but there's been a lot of talk and through AA and all of those things, and it's like we always have to like forgive the other people in our lives. And that's, I feel like it's more of a religious thing, right? Like that you've got to forgive others and all of the things that are done to you, and that will free you, right? Whereas over the last 15 years in kinesiology, what I've noticed and what I practice mostly pretty much now after all the other things that we got taught, I'm like, this is the thing. If we don't look at ourselves and forgive all of the ideas that we had about ourselves as humans, because if everyone looks, and you can see it when people are talking out loud or behaving anyway, what's going on inside. And a lot of people don't realize how disconnected they are from that true self, that you've it's almost like being so grateful for trauma and situations that take you away from yourself, because it forces you to come closer and do more extreme things to connect, right? Rather than just getting by and not realizing you're even disconnected.
Yeah, you don't even realize how disconnected you are. Somebody said the other day, they were talking about substance use, and I don't know if it's Gabor Mate who says this, but I believe this, and maybe it's someone else's idea, but the substance use that got me through those few years was what kept me here. And so it's like, I would never have seen it like that before. I saw it as like, I'm just an alcoholic, I'm just an addict, I'm just a such and such. And I'm like, no, because if I didn't have those things, I wouldn't have been able to survive all those years without it. And so, yeah, I love that. It's like, it's about reframing the ideas, the thoughts, the belief systems that you've developed over time, and not being like, well, this is what happens, and now look what happens. You just get to do other cool shit.
Well, it's compassion versus berating, isn't it? Right? Like if we go, I was an alcoholic and I did those bad things and I did feel shame about it, rather than, and Gabor Mate, it would have been his statement for sure, because he's beautiful in those statements and having those experiences as well, to see everything as perfection, which is really that kind of very spiritual kind of identity of everything happening for a reason. And it's really hard for some people to grasp that, especially when they're still deep in process of shame and blame, and like you said before, but in that victim space, it's very hard and very poisonous,
but necessary. And it's about trying to figure out how you're going to get out of it. And so many of us do get stuck there, and so we spend our lives stuck in that trigger state. And I want to also add, like, the alcoholic and the addict, it's like, I would never consider myself now either of those things. And I know that people assign those identities to themselves for a lifelong thing. Like, I'm, like Russell Brand, even though I think he's an absolute wanker. I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast. He says he can't use psychedelics because he's an addict. And I'm just like, well, if you had psychedelics, you would know that. I don't know that's necessarily true. That's not who you are. It's just something that you did for a while.
I think that's because they're trained that way, though. Like, he went through a lot of the AAs and I don't know what the DA is, it drug whatever. And I think it's very strict. And I believe, and this is just only what I believe, because I'm with you. I don't think I have had the tendency of addictions, for sure. But it's like that guy, I can't remember his name, who did the study with the rats, right? Like, when the rat's on its own, it will go back and have the cocaine. But when the rat's in with the group of rats, I think one rat tried it and didn't go back. And then no one else tried it in the thing because of that community and that space. So I feel like once we get to that space of wholeness within and around us, then to say that you're an addict and will always be an addict, again, I believe it comes from more of a religious, like, strict space. And I think that he's come from that space, and potentially people still sometimes need that as a structure to keep them in alignment.
Yeah, I think so too. And, not everybody's going to come to those same conclusions. So, whatever works for people, and if that's what works for them, that's great.
I mean, technically, psychedelics aren't addictive anyway, are they?
Not well. Look, I think I have known people who have habits of using them on a regular basis. Like, I guess, like, depends on who you talk to. If you talk to somebody who's never, you say you microdose drugs, they would say, well, that's an addiction, isn't it? And so I guess it depends on who you're talking to and the sort of framework that person works from.
And it would depend on how long for as well, right?
Like, they're not classically addictive, no. Like, they don't have these, they're not like nicotine or methamphetamines or, those other more addictive classes of drugs. But having said that, a lot of people I've known over my time in this field have used psychedelics too much, in my opinion, and even in theirs, so it's just about what those people are seeking when they're doing them. It's all about your intention.
Yeah, sorry, just quickly. And you could say that about spiritual bypassing as well, right? Like,
Yes.
it's not just, we can't blame the drug for it. It's like the person that continues to do it in a space of avoiding that. I think people get hooked on anything in that.
Yeah, that's right. Food or anything. That's absolutely right. It's just pick your poison.
So then I guess, you've gone down the LSD. Obviously now I'm assuming mushrooms is probably one of the biggest components that you work with. Now, and can I just clarify right now, Antanika, are you offering therapy with mushroom psychedelics as a service now?
No. So, well, obviously it's because it's not legal. I don't offer.
Isn't it? No, it's psychedelic.
No, it's clinical trials still, isn't it?
So it has just been legalized in Australia for authorized prescribers to prescribe MDMA or psilocybin, which is a synthetic version of the active ingredient in the magic mushrooms.
Yep.
They are legally allowed to now give that to people who meet a particular criteria of, this eligibility criteria.
Yep.
And then those people have to, apply. They have to meet those criteria. Then they have to attend 3 sessions with a psychiatrist, psychologist. Then with a psychiatrist, then they have dosing sessions, and they have the after integration, and it's quite expensive. It's only since July has that been legal, but that's not to say other people aren't doing work in what we call the underground.
Yeah.
But having said that, a lot of people aren't trained in particular modalities. There's I've heard of myself, a lot of harms in the underground, but that's also can be said for clinical trials that have gone on around the world as well. There's a lot of harms, even, psychologists and psychiatrists are not exempt from being human beings. So no, so I don't offer my services. I like to live in my home and with my family, and I don't want to be arrested.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair.
And there are a lot of people who have asked me to sit for them, and it is not illegal to sit for somebody who's doing psychedelics if they have their own psychedelics and they need your help. It's not illegal for you to sit with those people.
Oh, right. Okay.
If you can hold space for them while they're having an experience of any kind, any altered state experience from that could be breathwork, meditation, psychedelics, alcohol, whatever that is, you're allowed to sit with somebody and facilitate a safe space for them and create a safe setting. So, if I've had people call me up and say, I've done this substance, I need help. I've done the same thing. I've called up a friend and said, look, I've had this, I need help. And they have rushed to my side to sit with me. Not illegal for them to do that. That's actually a duty of care as a human being, I think. So, but what I do work in is integration space. So at the moment, I'm working with people who have gone through MDMA and psilocybin assisted therapy in Sydney or Melbourne, and that's legal. It's clinical in an actual clinic. And they go through a full process in order to have the experience. And then I help the psychologist provide integration support. And that includes providing tools and conversation, connections, resources for these people to continue their psychedelic journey. Because as you guys probably know, you don't just have the psychedelic and then you don't learn anything else after that. It continues on after. So, so and integration is one of my most favorite parts of the experience, because when people are having psilocybin experiences, and this is not to say I've never sat with anyone who's done these experiences, but when I have seen these people, often it's an inward thing and it's all to themselves, it's quiet, there's not a lot going on a lot of the time. And so it's the work that comes afterwards and setting up these new habits and thoughts and that sort of stuff. So it's a complex space.
So that's where the work's done, really, isn't it? The integration. If there's no integration, it's kind of like, what are you doing? But I mean, with anything in life, it's like, well, what am I doing with this thing now? Because people tend to go, I had this experience and whoa, it blew my mind. And it's like, well, what do we do with it? Not that we can't just enjoy an experience, but I just feel like there's so much to add to that.
Like a dream. It's like unpacking a dream, you know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of I like symbology, and so when people telling me their dreams or their psychedelic experience, it's the same thing to me. You're telling me, you might think you're just telling me about a pretty tree you saw that has like pictures of your family members dangling off of it or whatever, right? But to me, I'm like, okay, this is very symbolic. There's a lot to unpack here. And that's sort of the integration thing. It's like, that's not just a tree, and that's not just, you know, some weird thought pattern that you had. There's more in this. And that's where the fun part comes, I think. It's like, and a lot of the time, just asking questions for those people lets them to come to their own conclusions. Like any good therapy, I guess.
I was going to ask about, so with your journey with psychedelics and mushrooms, how long did you work with them over a period of time?
So eventually I ended up having a few mushroom experiences after LSD. Those were not, you know, big experiences. They were sort of like 2 grams of dried psilocybin that I'd picked myself, sort of thing. So I had those experiences, and they taught me like these little lessons about, you know, things like something so simple as I sat on this particular hill and I had this little note. I had a bunch of post-it notes, and I wrote a note saying like, you are whoever you can be or whatever. And a little ladybug sat on the edge of the paper.
Oh, cute.
And I was like, oh, so, you know, it's just a beautiful moment or whatever. But then as the experience ended and it was time for me to go home, I was standing at the top of this hill, and this hill was quite steep. And in my head, my mind went, run down the hill. And then this other voice came in, and it was my mum's voice. And she said, don't you dare run down that hill. And I said in my head, why? She said, because you're going to cry, you get hurt and cry, and I don't like that, you know? And so it made me realize how much my own mother struggled with my discomfort as a child. It stopped me from being able to do things that I wanted to do, just down to like little things like running down a hill, or, you know, rocking in my chair, or, you know, talking too much, or, you know, all these little things that our parents don't know that they're doing, that they're creating these pathways in us, you know. And so I went down the hill, and I ran almost the whole way home as a like 35-year-old woman.
Yeah.
You know, and so that was one of my most favorite and least scary psychedelic experiences, I think. Yeah, and from there I had another one not long after, and I had a microdose, which was not a microdose, where I ended up talking to 2 trial selves, and they kept saying, why are you punishing us? Stop punishing us, over and over. And I only really integrated that like 3 months ago. And that was 5 years ago, sort of thing.
Wow.
And so when I talk about the integration process, it's like the themes that come up might not present themselves as things to be worked on until you're further along in your experience of life.
So is your choice,
everything's a seed.
Is your choice now to mostly, I mean, if you were still doing that, would your choice or advice be to others to, you know, do a session with someone that you trust initially, or would you just go balls deep, let's do it on my own?
I do not ever recommend, like I did it once on my own, and it was a really hard time. And so we talk a lot with the Australian Psychedelic Society about set and setting. And set is your mindset, sort of where you're at. Do you feel, you know, ready? Where are you at in your hormonal cycle if you're a woman? Are you in the luteal phase or the follicular phase? And, you know, do you have premenstrual dysphoria? Like, there's so many elements that play into this that I've learned over the years. And I went to this hotel where I'd never stayed before. I took a, you know, 5 or 6 gram dose of mushrooms, which I'd never done before, on my own. And it kicked off, and I was like, oh no, what have I done? What have I done? And I called up my husband, and he's like, I can't leave the kids. What are you talking about? He's now away from home. So I call up my friend who's a psychologist. She's no longer with us. She passed away last year, sadly. And I said, I need you to come and sit with me. And she's like, you're going to be fine. Blah, blah, blah. But I was like, come sit with me. And so she did. And she came and sat, and she just watched me flop around in the bath for like 4 hours. And I was fine. But it was a very scary thing to do on my own. I wasn't in the right state in my mind because I hadn't really thought much into it. I hadn't prepared properly. My setting wasn't good. I'd never stayed in that hotel. I didn't have my comforts. I didn't, there was a balcony, and that balcony scared me, So you get all these weird thoughts, and having somebody there that you can sometimes either bounce them off of, or they can say, I noticed that you're fidgeting. Do you want some, are you cold? Are you warm? Do you need more hot water? Are you thirsty? Bring me fruits, sort of these sorts of things are really important. And so it's really important that is somebody you trust.
Yeah.
Because if you don't trust that person, you're not going to have a good time.
No.
If it helps you, the first time, and we only tried for the first time, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Would have been 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though I'd pretty much tried every other drug under the sun, there was this fear that I had of mushrooms.
In particular, we lived in an apartment, so there was a balcony, and it was
So I was like, I want to do microdosing. I really want to know this. So there's because I like to explore things. Like I always will try things to understand them from my doing of it. And then Nicola's like, oh, maybe I should do it with you. And I was like, oh, we'll see anyway. I'll go get it. But when I was sourcing it, and the person who is very as professional as you can get in those fields, and she said, I know you have to do a full dose before you can do microdosing. And I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, so I bought 5 grams, and she told me how to make it with the tea and everything. And I was like, okay. And I said, well, Nicola might jump on board as well. And she goes, oh, well, there's enough there for 2 of you anyway. So I went home, made the tea, and Nicola's got to do it. But Nicola wanted someone to be there to stop us from jumping off the balcony.
Yeah, because I was worried I was going to jump off the balcony. And so we locked ourselves in this room because it was like, no one, we can't go past this door.
Yeah, because the same thing, it's right. You fear the balcony, and you feel like, it's the same as fear of heights, right? Like you don't fear of the height, you fear of jumping off the balcony, right? That's the fear. So we are making the tea, and Nicola's like, are you sure it's the whole 5 grams? And I'm like, yeah, because she said 2.5 for like a therapeutic dose for me. And then she said there was enough for you. So obviously she's talking about the other 2.5 grams, blah, blah. Anyway, it turns out that's not the truth.
Yeah.
So for our first ever mushroom experience, we took a 5 gram dose. Thank God we were together with our dog locked in a normal sized bedroom.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours.
It was very
Yeah, there's so much, and it's really interesting. There's a lot of people who work in the underground, and people who will, sell these substances and such, who will tell you exactly how you need to do them. And it's like, well, I'm going to ask around, because I've heard that a lot of times, that people are like, no, you have to have the full 5 grams before you microdose. And it's like, well, I actually have learned that I like to get to know a plant or a substance a little bit before I engage deeply into it. And I think that if that's what somebody's comfortable with, that's what they're comfortable with. And especially with, I think, things like mushrooms, like psilocybin, they're very powerful. And even a microdose and a meditation can really shake someone up. And given that this, if you're not getting this medicine from the people who are working in the clinical side of things, it's not a measured dose. You don't know how much psilocybin's in there.
Hers are. The woman that grows them is that she does them in a controlled environment. So 5 grams is 5 grams. She didn't, to be fair, she didn't tell me to take 5 grams. She told me to take 2.5 grams. And I misread. So I made a pot of tea of 5 grams. And when I went back to her and I told her what happened, she went, oh, I probably should have told you that would be. Then she said, congratulations, you've just done a hero's dose on your first journey. And I was like, well, what's meant to be is meant to be, and we're all here and safe, so that's good. But
Yeah. Yeah, and so many people are just fine. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like everyone's so different, and I've seen so many people have like no experience at all on 5 grams. Some people have like mind-shattering, reality-changing. Like when I did those 5 grams on my own, I had no idea how much like DMT a big experience of mushrooms is because of the tryptamines. It's a similar chemical makeup, apparently. I don't know heaps on that. Don't quote me on that. But that's what I've been told. So in that experience, when I closed my eyes, I went to another place. Like I was in a underground world, and there was a little goblin there. And every time I shut my eyes, he was crouched there, and he was like, "Oh, you're here." And then I'd open my eyes and I was back in the room. And then I'd close my eyes again. He's like, "Oh, sort of thing." And I was just like, what is going on? And so I think there's a lot of, it's really important to like, there's little infographics online of like different doses and the effects to expect. And that's pretty rough, but it's a really good guide for like, not all of us need to go and see a different reality. At that point, I didn't need to see a different reality. And so any doses that I do of psilocybin are generally quite small because I don't need to know about the other realities. I already experienced them in DMT and the big mushroom dose. I know they exist, but what am I going to do with that? I've sat at the edge of the universe and contemplated the world. So, what I need to know is, how do I stop being so anxious about being a mum, or how do I let go of this, or how do I, improve this habit that I have around food or whatever. These are the things that I want to integrate. And so at the lower doses, and I think that there's a lot more that we can bring back from the experience. But everyone's, like I say, everyone's different.
Do you find that through mushrooms or psychedelic treatment therapy, do you find because you've had some great awarenesses that you've spoken about, do you find that increases, like, obviously practice, meditating obviously brings that awareness, but do you find that therapy does that similar kind of awareness to you?
Absolutely does. So I was very, until I started using psychedelics, I was one of those people who said I couldn't meditate. Can't do that. Can't do that. Can't do that. Yoga's not that good for you. And now I love breath work. I do breath work because it's the closest thing that I can get to feeling the same way a psychedelic makes me feel in the aftermath. After a psychedelic is done, the next day there's this afterglow effect. And I find that things like work or even yoga these days, realize the door's opening. It's opened me up to.
Was that a metaphor?
They're going to be loud in a minute. It's opened me up to this whole different world of experiences. Like when, like for instance, when I wanted to try DMT, and I'd never tried DMT before, and I don't know if you guys have heard much about DMT, but it's quite short acting. There's also different versions, which is, I think, taken from a Tory, but there's all these different ways that people use
ways to have it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so I sat in this experience with DMT, and I had a question. I was like, who am I, sort of thing, because I didn't know who I was. This was after some of my mushroom experiences as well. And so I was offered DMT one day, and it was extracted from some of the most beautiful trees behind the university I attended.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was really cool. And now my friend is actually buried under a tree there. It's really cool. Not her body, just some ashes. Not her body. Okay. So in this experience, I'd gone in being like, who am I? I need to know. And there was these voices that just said, you are whoever you believe yourself to be. And I was like, what? What?
So profound and so like
oh, okay, I guess that's it, and it's like it opens me up to that, like, what do I believe about myself?
Yeah.
And so then since then I've like been trying to figure out like what do I believe about myself and what makes that up. And so that sent me on all of these experiences of meditating and going to these breathwork courses and learning all this stuff that I never considered before. And it put me back in touch with this spiritual version of myself that's really quite intimate and personal now. And had I not had these experiences, I would never be where I am. And I don't give credit to the psychedelics, but it was in me all along, right? Just needed a little nudge.
Yeah. Well, it's a process. It's a journey. It's a bit like the onion layers. If they were all to come off at once, you'd be fucked, really, because you'd be like, I've just convulsed all over myself and I don't know how to live anymore. So it's going to be that incremental process of self-discovery, isn't it?
So I've got to go. What happened?
I was going to ask with microdosing, because we're huge advocates of it, and I remember, and I'd love to
say that, but we haven't done it for like 2 years.
Well,
a year and a half.
Well, no, I think we did it. No, maybe a year and a half. Anyway, but before that, we've been, on the train. I love microdosing. I've had some really amazing, I just love how it has these thoughts that come through and just changes your whole belief of something. And you're like, fuck, where did that even come from? And I wanted to ask, because ever since, it's like I'd microdose and I can't seem to get any of those awarenesses anymore, those things that come through. And it was quite prevalent for probably, I don't know, for a good amount of time. But now I'm taking quite, I used to take quite big doses. Is there for microdosing? Is there a right amount for microdosing?
Well, generally, they say microdosing is subperceptual, so you're not supposed to feel it.
Yeah, you're
supposed to go about your day.
Yeah.
So, but having said that, in my own experiences with microdosing, I have found that the reason that altered states work so well is because we're altered, and if we're not altered, we sometimes won't get the perspective shifts that we're looking for. And so sometimes it's hard for me, I don't know, and there's probably some research out there on this, I think, that the lower doses, those small doses, could almost be placebo in a way. Yeah, I'm sure that they do boost serotonin in the brain, but they're not going to provide you the same insights. And so I think we do get kind of used to it. And like I said, with that large mushroom experience I had, I didn't take anything away from that experience that I didn't already know. The only thing that I learned from that experience was that I could call my friend and she would come. I would call for help and someone would come for me. That was it. That was not part of the psychedelic journey itself. It was just me freaking out, being able to ring a friend and,
so that you're supported.
Yeah. And so I think, even in the LSD experiences, I haven't revisited LSD because I felt like I was like, well, I've seen it now. I know what this is. I've experienced those insights. Yeah, and my husband's the same. He's had he likes LSD and he's had experiences to me. And he said to me the other day, I kind of felt like I knew everything that was being presented to me. I knew how to face the fear that came up. I knew how to blah, blah, blah. And so I think that's why you sort of do find over time you use less and less psychedelics, because you start to be like, oh, okay, well, I've already learned that or whatever, or I've already revisited that trauma. I've got no emotional connection to that now, or, so I think over time you do realize I'm learning the lessons. I just need to integrate them into my life now.
I think too. Yeah. I think too, for me, I noticed a lot of the things that I used to do when I didn't necessarily feel as favorable of myself, it was easy because I wanted to be away from my body or away from my being, or take me out of this, take me away from this into something else. And even if it was MDMA or something like that years ago, it was I felt that was when I was my true self, because it got rid of all my inhibitions and all of the anxiety until it come down. But it was like that person that just went, oh my God, here I am, right? Mm-hmm. But for the most part, everything that I used to do years and years ago they don't appeal to me anymore because I'm comfortable being in my body and I'm comfortable being here. So to take myself out of that actually feels like the distortion now.
Yeah, because it's that connection.
Yeah, and it's not that I wouldn't do mushrooms again or other things, but there's not that. It's a total flip of what you're trying to get for yourself, right? When you're doing those things. So you're doing it before, because when, like you said, when you're disconnected, and you didn't say it like this, but that's what I'm getting from it. When you're disconnected, it'll help you to connect the dots more. But when you're connected, you go, is that going to enhance me, or is it just going to
detract from your reality?
Or nothing?
Yeah, that's right. So it's, I think that you kind of, that's exactly what I was saying pretty much. But so I think there's no, so from the sounds of it, your microdoses are large actual doses.
But, they have been, because I was just really intrigued because it just wasn't hitting the mark anymore, and I just thought, well, fuck,
maybe they've been in our freezer for too long too.
Yeah, maybe, they do lose their potency after a while, that sort of thing.
So maybe you're such a cool cat, it doesn't matter.
That's highly that is absolutely
very possible.
I'm fucking sitting on a thing there, so
I was about to say that.
I'm from another planet already, so
you're on a meteorite.
Meteorite, that's one. Now, Antanika, I want to know your thoughts on whether you believe psychedelics mushrooms could assist with behaviors such as ADHD, autism, things like that. Because obviously we know a lot of, there's lots of coming out with trauma, which I fucking fly the flag on. What do you think about the other stuff?
I love that question. That's one of my favorite topics. So I'm actually diagnosed autistic and ADHD, and I have premenstrual dysphoric disorder as well. So I used to microdose LSD during the luteal phase of my cycle, because there was a little bit of anecdotal research out there to say that LSD could potentially help people with premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And I actually found that
can you just I'm unfamiliar with that. What is it?
So premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. So I had microdose LSD for a year, pretty much every little phase, and it really did help me get through some of the more difficult parts of that time. It helped me eat food when I couldn't, that sort of thing. It helped improve my mood. However, I do find that using psychedelics in your premenstrual stage of your cycle can also, enhance like neurotic behaviors. It can enhance anxiety if you're not looking after yourself, and that means, like, if you're not going for a walk after you're microdosing, if you're microdosing because you're not feeling good, it's only going to amplify the not feeling good. Those psychedelics are an amplifier. So however you're feeling, that's what I talk about with the set of your mindset. If you're already feeling neurotic and anxious and overwhelmed, having a microdose of LSD might not be the best way to go. But at the same time, if you're going to go and go to yoga or go for a walk with your friend or those sorts of things, you're sort of facilitating the substance for the best of your body, because the substance is there to sort of facilitate helping you participate in your life. You can't just take something. It's like antidepressants. If you take an antidepressant and don't change anything about your life, your life is just not going to get better. It's supposed to support you in getting better. Same with psychedelics as well. I did try to microdose mushrooms for ADHD. I personally didn't find that it assisted much. I did find it helped improve my mood, but focus-wise, I'm a very deep thinker already, and I often feel microdoses quite intensely. And it's hard to microdose mushrooms if you don't know the exact amount of psilocybin in each mushroom. So the doses vary so much, and so I found it quite unpredictable. But a lot of people also say that if they microdose, it's the next following days that are the days that are better for them as well. So it depends very much on the individual, and a lot of people who have these conditions have so many co-occurring co-occurring conditions at the same time. And so it's like this, especially for women with their cycles, and we all have so many chemical and hormonal imbalances these days.
Well, there's a reason why, like, I think it's only in the last 10 years, maybe you might know more about this, that they've actually started testing like supplements and things on women, because they did 80% of them were all tested on men, because women were so all over the place with their hormones. And I know it sounds horrible, and women, like when that first came out, you know, people were like, oh, that's disgusting. What about support for us? But it's like, you can kind of understand it. Given if you had 4 women in a room and you asked them all a questionnaire, like we'd come together on probably things like, yeah, it's fucked. And like,
yeah, we all agree.
Like that, or why am I so crazy? Oh, I just got my cycle. You know, like all of these different things that we can all come together on. But it's then the variable is so different, and hormones are so different for everyone and the way they're going to interact. So it's so challenging. And then to mix that with something that's not, like you said, I said the ones that I got were measured in a controlled environment. But like you said, if it's not a measured dose, you're not, you know, it's like punching holes in the clouds for every single element and going, oh, it might be this, but we'll bring it, and might be this together, and hope for the best.
And I feel fortunate that I've been able to, you know, experiment with these substances for long periods of time to sort of figure out which ones work best for me, sort of thing as well. So, you know, it's like not everyone has that ability. They get some mushrooms from a friend or whatever, and they've only got such and such to last a certain amount of time, and then it's not enough time. You know, you need a long time to figure out whether it's going to help your ADHD. And like, if you have ADHD and you have PMDD or premenstrual disorders or hormonal issues, it's gonna change every single month. And so it's like, it's really quite hard to know. Like, but having said that, they are currently doing some research around LSD and premenstrual disorders as well. So I think over the next few years, we will find that there's a lot more talk about, you know, how women and psychedelics, like how hormones interject. I know that there's actually a webinar coming up that I'll be attending that the Australian applied psychologists, I think it's called, are putting on to talk specifically about psychedelics and women's hormones. And some of the clinics I work in, they'll talk to their clients about, you know, where at your cycle are you and how does it affect you, and when would be the most appropriate time to, you know, do these dosing sessions.
And so
MDMA probably less so.
Yeah, 100%. It's still got a little bit to go. And so if someone was looking to venture into the space based on this amazing conversation we've had and gone, fuck, maybe I should give it a go, what would you recommend? What would your suggestion be?
So one of the most common things I get so many messages, like my message request box is just filled with people just being like, I need someone to sit for me. I've never done this before. I need the substance as well, et cetera, et cetera. And I always say to them, join one of your local communities, find a network of people that you're comfortable with, and when it happens, it will happen. The thing is that people are like so desperate these days, and they just want it now. And they'll find someone on Facebook Marketplace, and they'll get substances, and they get scammed, and all these sorts of things. And it's like, without the community in the first place, you're going to really struggle to integrate afterwards anyway, especially if you're not open with this about it with your friends or your family or your partner. What about outside? Sorry, my dog wants to go outside so badly. And so, you know, getting involved in your local psychedelic communities or your substance, you know, whatever it is that your sort of group you're seeking, it's about finding the community in the first place. And not that I say that anyone in our communities is like, you know, facilitating these experiences, but it's actually a lot about learning and figuring out who the safe people are to talk to about this, having big conversations, you know, so often I'll hear of one person coming to an event and we won't see them again because they've gone off and had a psychedelic experience and it didn't go very well, and then you never hear from them again. And the thing is that the part that's actually not helpful in that is that they actually need the community. So I always say community, find the people that you can talk to. There's so many people online. There's so many good organizations that are really open about talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And if you are going to partake, you know, find someone you can at least message on that day and say, look, I'm going to do this today. Yep. I just need you to know, you know, I have people that do that all the time. They're like, I just need you to know that this is what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't directly answer your question.
It's like going for a bushwalk, isn't it? You know, like let people know where you're at, and especially if you're doing something on your own, because if something goes pear-shaped, you can sort it out.
Yeah.
And what's I mean, you've got a great message in terms of where you've come from and where, you know, what you've uncovered within yourself and how you're feeling as an individual from where you were. Where's next for you, darling? What do you want?
Oh, good question. I've got so much stuff going on at the moment that I'm just like, I think eventually I will end up working in psychedelic therapy with people wanting, like, you know, in the clinical space. Yep. I've got whispers that's what I'm being not whispers from like spiritual world, like actual people.
The real deal. The voices aren't in your head.
I see dead people.
You know, I had sort of succumbed to the idea that I wouldn't probably ever work in the clinical space in psychedelics because I haven't trained in it, you know, I haven't.
Yeah.
But, you know, trained as in like I haven't got my degree.
Yeah.
There's no degree, you know, that can prepare you for this. And so I believe that I will end up working in that space with, you know, people who are seeking treatment in the clinical space, which is really exciting because I am seeing, as much as I love the underground world of psychedelics, the above ground world also has a lot to offer people who, you know, who don't delve in this world. There's a lot of people who I talk to who are like, what are you talking about? Psychedelics?
Yeah, totally.
You know, like I'm just this like mum who lives in a house, you know, and homeschools her kids and blah, blah, blah. And people have like never heard of psychedelics. And so I know how deep this world goes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that I'm just going to plod along supporting people in the integration, in the psychedelics themselves. Every time I think I'm about to step away from the psychedelic realm and politics of it or whatever, I always end up being pulled back in.
Sometimes someone sends you a podcast and says a request for a podcast, and you're like, damn it, I was about to stop.
Yeah, I was like, I'm giving up everything when I got that email. I was in such a state. I just, you know, I burn out a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I volunteered for the APS for, you know, 6 years now. We're all volunteers there. So I really encourage anyone who's listening to your podcast to go and check out our website at the psychedelicsociety.org.au.
Yeah,
we have a lot of resources. We host groups we have chapters in almost every state.
Amazing.
You can go along and attend like social groups. You can attend integration events. You can attend film screenings and panels. We advocate for decriminalisation eventually, which we hope will happen one day. So, you know, it's getting involved in those local communities that will just like broaden your depth of knowledge. And a lot of it comes from learning from everyone else. I haven't learned all of this stuff from some researcher at uni, you know. I've learned all this from having so many different conversations, so many different people from all walks of life, and you'll be really surprised at the people who show up to some of these events, or the ones who come to our events and are like, have said to me, oh, you're just a normal lady. Why don't you guys got like rave music and dancing around? And I'm like, we're just a group of people.
Yeah.
We have a shared interest in the mental health of individuals.
So good.
Thank you so much, Antanika. Like, it's just been so good to chat to you and share your knowledge and wisdom in this area because, you know, as you know, there's so much pain and trauma in our life. And, you know, ultimately, you know, we all want to be liberated and be whole. Yeah. And I totally.
And it's possible.
It's possible. It's possible. And you're living proof of that. And I fucking kudos to you and keep doing what you do, sharing that message and don't get overwhelmed because you're too good to get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And we will leave all your links below. So if anyone wants to get in contact, all the links will be below.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to like and subscribe to this right now, this minute, because we want more followers, because the more followers, the more amazing people we can talk to like this, and then their message gets out and it's one beautiful community.
Yeah.
So subscribing and sharing and all of that jazz is good for you people's listening and watching to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Antanika. And we'll be in touch at some point, but thank you.
Yes.
We'll be ringing you going, I'm about to do this thing today. I just needed to let someone know.
Just let someone know. All you need is a message saying, you're safe, don't worry. It's good.
Yeah, totally. Reassurance.